In this video, we're going to talk about how Spotify can improve as a platform in some very specific ways. Of course, you could just say they should pay everyone more money, but there's a little more nuance to that, which I've covered in previous videos. Specifically, we're going to be going over this article from Music Business Worldwide in collaboration with Stef Van Vugt. I don't know how to say his name, but either way, this is kind of ironic because he's the founder of Fruits Music, which is perhaps the company that has most taken advantage of a lot of the quirks and problems that Spotify has. So in this thing, it says this op-ed comes from him, so I'm guessing that means he wrote this. Ironically, like the person who has most exploited Spotify and how they work is telling them how they can fix all the exploits that he's been able to take advantage of. And I did cover Lo-Fi Fruits before, or Fruits Music before, if you want to check out this video right here, learn more about him and them, because it's very interesting how they've built their platform up. Now, one of the big fixes that I totally agree with, and I don't agree with everything on here perfectly, but royalties could be paid by the second instead of per stream. So if you're not familiar, right now Spotify pays when a user listens to 30 seconds of a song. That's what counts as a stream. If they listen for a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. If they listen to 30 seconds, you're paid for that stream. Anything longer doesn't make a single difference in terms of payment. It might impact algorithmic things, but in terms of money, doesn't matter. Because of this, artists are incentivized, which he actually brings up here. Artists are incentivized to make shorter songs. And so by introducing time-based royalties, artists will be more incentivized to create whatever type of art they truly believe in. At the same time, fans would be incentivized to generate longer form, high-quality visual material. So to me, I think this makes a lot of sense. It makes no sense why a 2-minute song should make the same amount of money as a 10-minute song when one might keep the user on the platform more. It doesn't make sense, at least in my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Now, there's a second point here that I've talked about before in the past, and this is user-centered payments. So I have an old video that I'll put here if I could find it. But essentially, right now, what Spotify does is if they look in the US, for example, look at one country at a time, add up all the money generated by that country for Spotify, from ads and premium separately, and then divide that by the number of streams. And that's the payment per stream. So what that means is the more streams that happen in a country, the less a stream is worth. So theoretically, if you were to run a bot farm and stream your song 1 million times, you'll make like $3,500, right? But if we switch to a user-centric platform, the way that works is they divide it up per user. So here, let's say, for example, a user listens to one artist for a whole month and they pay $10 for the premium subscription. They just listen to one artist for that whole month. So all $10 essentially goes to the artist minus Spotify's 30% cut. So that artist would get $7, whether the person generated 10 streams on their profile or 100,000 streams in their profile. They paid X amount. They only listen to that artist, so that artist gets all that money for that month. And this makes a lot of sense because right now, as a user of Spotify, whether you listen to Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Ed Sheeran at all, a big chunk of all the money you pay to Spotify if you pay for an account, or ad revenue if you're using the free version, is actually going to those artists. So user-centric model makes a lot of sense. It also completely eliminates the profitability of bots. Because right now you could run a bot, have it stream your song 1 million times, generates $3,500. It might only cost you, I don't know, $10, $100 to run a bot. I have no idea how much it costs to run a bot farm. But you can actually make a lot of money with that, right? Because when you do that, you're essentially stealing money from other artists because the more streams in the pool, the less a stream is worth. So you're incentivized to run bots. If it's a user-centric model, each user can only generate X amount of money, and they have to pay for that amount of money. So like you'd have to be paying the same amount of money you would per bot, except now that bot can no longer generate more money than they put into the pool. Does that make sense? So that would essentially solve the bot problem on Spotify, which is a huge problem. It's a lot of fake accounts and playlisting that has fake followers and all that. Now, this one I'm not sure I agree with. And what they're talking about here, what he's talking about here, is a music streaming partner program. And I think this is an interesting concept because right now there's a big problem where 100,000 tracks are being uploaded to streaming services every day. And this dilutes the ecosystem, right? There's a lot of music. It's really overwhelming for a listener. And so the other problem with this is that a lot of the music that's uploaded is it's not from real artists. It's from people like Lo-Fi Fruits or whatever, or Fruits Music, or it's from just fake names and stuff being uploaded, and you can make money off of that without having a real artist that you're paying. And his argument here is that if we had a threshold where an artist had to have 1,000 followers before they can make money from Spotify, or they have to have at least 4,000 listen hours of music in the past year, excluding algorithmic or playlist-driven streams. They'd have to hit those thresholds before qualifying. And I don't know if I like that. I like the fact that it would cut out a lot of the crap on the platform. What I don't like is that that's one nice thing about the streaming platforms. Like, you have to pay to get on a distributor and get it, and so you could have 4,000 watch time hours in a year isn't that much. Like, that's not a big number. But at least when an artist is starting, it's kind of nice that even if they made $10 in the past year off their music, or $5, it's nice that they could still get something for the music that they did. And it kind of sucks that all those people would just be getting $0 now. And now there's a barrier to entry when there's already so many other barriers to entry. Like, you have to get a distributor, which isn't that bad. Especially like a lot of services make it super easy at super affordable rates. It's not a big deal. But there's already so many other barriers to getting music heard, and now it's like you're not going to be paid anything until you hit this milestone. I don't know if it makes sense, but it does solve some problems. And now the next thing he mentions actually does kind of solve the problem. Not the next thing, open source algorithm. We'll cover that in a sec. But direct distribution. And here he's talking about how Spotify could just not require a distributor. Like, be kind of like SoundCloud or YouTube, where you can just go on Spotify and upload music, which I think is interesting. But obviously then you'd have to upload your music to like every platform separately, which even then it kind of justifies the ease of using a distributor just because there's so many platforms. But it is an interesting concept, and that would solve some of the issues I just mentioned. But open source algorithm, I think, is a fantastic point, because you've seen all the videos I've made on this channel talking about like figuring out Spotify's algorithm, how to get on Discover Weekly and Release Radar, because it's about saves and streams and listeners or playlist ads, like what numbers are the most important. All that stuff is behind a black box right now. And he's arguing that it might actually be good to have an open source algorithm where everyone can see how the algorithm works. The algorithm is based on something that makes sense, so it can't be gamed. And I kind of agree with this, because this is how YouTube works. Everyone knows what's important for the YouTube algorithm. You need to get the highest amount of clicks, highest amount of click-through rate on your thumbnail and title, and get the highest amount of watch duration for your video. So essentially, you're optimizing for watch time. And YouTube and Google tell us this. Like, optimize your content for watch time. They've said this a whole bunch of times throughout history. And it's a pretty fair metric, because like, if you can keep people watching your videos for longer, that must mean your video's good. And if we could do a similar thing on Spotify, like, there's an algorithm behind it that is based on something that we all know. It's getting people to listen to your entire song, or getting people to listen to multiple songs of you back to back, or whatever it is. Like, something that should be fair and represent what an actual fan would do, not something that can be gamed, like getting a bunch of short streams from a playlist, or something like skip rates aren't even accurate either. I think something like that could make sense. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of irony here that this list has been created by someone who has arguably exploited a lot of these things more than anyone else. But I think he's in a good position to point this out, because he's basically made a career and a livelihood out of exploiting a lot of the problems that streaming services have right now. And he's proposing solutions to them. Some of these I think are realistic, and some of these are perhaps not so realistic. But I hope that Spotify pays attention to these things and considers them to see if maybe it would make sense for them business-wise. And then the business decision could also be influenced by if it makes sense for artists too. So it's good for business, it's good for artists. That would be really cool. And it'd be, hopefully, they're aware of all these things, which I have to imagine they are. But anyways, if you found this video interesting, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you agree or disagree with any of these points. If you want to see more music industry news type stuff, check out this playlist right here. And this video at the bottom is whatever YouTube thinks you should watch next. So check it out. It might be awesome. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.